we're still
extraordinary is that this all began to start around 1:30 this afternoon with some social media posts by this media influencer who has about 5 million followers, and that by 3 o'clock the crowd had surged to a couple of thousand, and police were mobilizing to respond, and by 4 o'clock things started to really get pretty ugly out there, according to the chief of department, that the crowd surged, breaking into what was a construction zone around the Union Square subway station, and some people there were armed themselves with everything from axes to rocks to paint cans, and amid the crowd things began to fly, and that's described some of the injuries. According to the fire department, no one transported by ambulance, at least early on, so at least the injuries described not severe. We're still going to check with some of the area hospitals to see if they had walk-ins. But again, some of the officers were trampled. Some of the officers were injured, hit by rocks and debris. So the pictures that show a lot of the pushing, the shoving, and as we saw earlier, some of the debris that was flying, obviously hitting many in that crowd, including officers, causing some minor injuries and numerous injuries. As for the number of arrests, Chief Madry said they're still tallying them up. But he talks about, as you pointed out, Natalie, a busload of arrestees, and then the crowd literally tried to attack the bus to try to free them. That, according to the chief of department during this briefing. And we did speak with a police spokesman who said there were a couple of dozen arrests, perhaps as many as 40. The social media influencer, Kai Sanat, is in custody. He is being questioned. And as you heard from the chief of department, a determination will be made whether he will be charged inciting a riot, one of the ideas being contemplated, according to the chief of department during that first and preliminary press briefing. The NYPD mobilized its highest level of mobilization. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of officers called into Manhattan South and the Union Square area to try to help restore some sense of order as the crowd not only gathered in Union Square, but then dispersed and were moving along side streets, and they're still following some of those crowds at this hour. But most of Union Square now cleared as police try to get an assessment. But again, this social media event, not coordinated in advance, not pre-planned, and it just shows the power of social media, that one individual with millions of followers could promise a giveaway, and thousands of people showing up in Union Square, causing the chaos we saw this afternoon.
And Jonathan, we know the NYPD ramped up their social media monitoring for terrorism and anti-terrorism efforts. Now the chief's saying we may have to take a look. There may be another chapter in law enforcement. All right. We've had crews positioned out to see the dispersal, talk to some of the young people. Checky Beckford is in Union Square. Checky?
Yeah, and we've seen hundreds of young people coming this way, just a couple of blocks west of Union Square Park, as the crowds were dispersing, police forcing the crowds to disperse from that area. We actually saw a couple of them come by just a few seconds ago talking about how it was a party over there. In general, though, that's not what we've been hearing from most of the people who were in Union Square, who went there for those free PS5 units and gift certificates. They say, as you take a look down the street here, down toward Union Square Park, where we see police lights still flashing, mounted units standing at the perimeter. People tell us they went for that reason, but it turned into something they couldn't have imagined. They say that people were pushing and shoving. We talked to one man who says that he was pushed to the ground. His face had a visible cut on it. As you heard the chief of department mention, a lot of people were hurt in all of this, bleeding from the head, walking, or people had panic attacks that he noticed. He himself was injured, pushed to the ground as well, which he said he was somewhat embarrassed about. Just a truly chaotic scene. And here we go from one of the people who we talked to, who was a witness, who describes what happened. Take a listen.
People standing on top of subway stations, and they were just trying to get wherever they want. It was no cars could not move. Yeah. Could not move. The traffic had stopped completely.
Everybody was doing everything, climbing thing. They even climbed where they was doing the train stop. And I was like, they started throwing paint, fire hydrant everywhere. And dust was everywhere, garbage is everywhere, paint is everywhere. I was scared, honestly.
And you heard that witness mention people throwing paint. Well, as the chief of department mentioned, those crowds had gotten into a construction site there in Union Square Park and taken some of that paint. They'd taken things like shovels and even axes, we're told, and were using them, throwing them at each other, at police. That scene, just one that was totally unbelievable. The chief of department saying that they've encountered scenes like this before, but nothing to this level of danger where young people were not heeding those warnings from police when police warned them over and over again to leave the scene. We're live near Union Square. Checky Beckford, News 4, New York.
All right, Checky, thank you. Yes, the police chief of department, they're also talking about how they have to go back and check on their officers to see what those injuries were, because a lot of them just stayed there on scene.
Including himself, he said.
Including himself. And he also said some of those kids had walked out having panic attacks. It's just an intense situation. Let's get out to Jessica Cunnington live where all that action was going on earlier. Looks pretty cleared out now, Jess.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, you just got a really great sum up of what we just heard from Chief of Department Jeffrey Madry about what exactly unfolded here. I mean, it absolutely got out of control, and he really admitted that and said that they're going to really be looking into moving forward how to really prevent something like this from happening ever again. I want to show you some video from earlier. I mean, we were right in the middle of it, and specifically, we witnessed those the fireworks that went off at different points. And they said inside the park, you know, this was really not only people in the crowd versus each other, it was also people versus officers, some officers injured, a lot of young people with minor injuries as well. But this definitely escalated, and I spoke to multiple young people about what they expected to get out of today, and then what, of course, happened once they got here. Take a listen with one witness here.
We did not expect for this many people to be out here. It's crazy. And for all this chaos and commotion to be going on, it's like, it's insane. The moment changed when people were throwing like bottles at like the police and stuff. When the Banes, I heard the two Banes, it was like, that's when things got a little crazy.
I seen people throwing water, and that's all. People jumping on top of cars, windows breaking.
Yeah, so those are just some of the examples of what people witnessed during really the height of the chaos here that happened in the park. Obviously, right now, we are not seeing any of the crowds in this immediate area. You're taking a look at all the debris and kind of damage to that construction area that's left behind right by the Union Square subway station. But as the chief said, really what happened today, it definitely speaks to the power of social media and also the danger of social media. We will send it back to you live from Union Square.
Yeah, all too clear. All right, Jessica, thank you. There is an ongoing law enforcement effort tied to this as the crowds disperse. Let's get to Miles Miller, who's also near Union Square. Miles?
That's right. We are at about 16th Street and Union Square, and you can see here they've still got the park closed down for right now. They've done a lot to disperse this area. A lot of the officers who came in from around the city are being turned back to their commands at this point, but you can see just a crush of police who came out here to try to control these crowds. Now, they've done a good job of pushing everybody out of the area south and north, and at this point, what they'll do is try to get any remaining people who were in that crowd out of the area. But they've reopened the streets here, traffic flowing again, and they've got a handle of the situation. I'll send it back to you.
Miles, thank you.